I'm currently in the market for a gold nib pen in the around $150 range, and I'm considering a Pilot Vanishing Point or perhaps a Lamy Studio Platinum Grey or Palladium. So that's one of the gold nib gold nib Lamy Studios. Are there any other recommendations that you have in this price range? So that's first question. On another note, how does the 1.0 stub of the VP compare to something like a Lamy 1.5 or 1.1? Okay, cool. So I'm going to start off with the first question. So in the $150 range, the Vanishing Point and the Lamy Studio, both great choices. The Vanishing Point is very cool, classic, great intro price, gold nib pen, easy recommendation for me. Just, yeah, totally just do it. Like, it's very few people ever regret getting a Vanishing Point. Lamy Studio, that's a little more up in the air. It's got a slick metal grip section, which I'm not as crazy about. However, it's a slick looking pen, and that nib on that pen, that 14 karat Lamy nib is fantastic. It's very wet, so make sure you go smaller on the nib size than you're typically used to. If you normally like medium nibs, go with a fine on that particular nib. It's not necessarily that way with the Vanishing Point. The Vanishing Point is going to be kind of the opposite. The extra fine and fine is going to be really fine. The medium and broad are more normal, like European nib size. Well, normal, what is that? More of a kind of a standard European nib size. The fine and extra fine are a little finer on the Vanishing Point. You know, people generalize and say like, oh yeah, Japanese nibs are all finer, you should definitely go a size finer. It's not always the case. Usually the extra fine and fines are finer than the European nibs, but the mediums and broads are usually about the same for both Japanese and European, so I found. The Studio though, great writing pen, so I would just go with those finer nibs, and it's very springy, very smooth, really great nibs. I wish they offered them on more pens than just those. Literally, it's the Studio, in the gray and the Palladium, I think it's called Platinum Grey, yeah, Platinum Grey and the Palladium, and the Dialogue 3. And the new Emporium, I think, has the same nib. So those are like the only ones that you can get this nib on, which is pretty cool. And they're all, the Studio is definitely like the cheapest of all the bunch to get this Lamy gold nib on. So, you know, that is kind of cool as well. And then, is there anything, any recommendations in this price range? So for all of you in the hashtag Goulet Nation, I'm going to say go ahead and try and fill in the blanks. What pen would I recommend? What two pens? Read my mind a little bit here. What two pens am I going to recommend in the $150-ish price range that's not a Vanishing Point or a Studio? Well, one, I'll let you take a second and think about it just so you can feel good about yourself if you can read my mind. One of them is going to be a Pilot Custom 74. It's $160, tad more than these other ones, but love it. This is my blue one that's been with me for years. I have it in both the fine and the medium, and they both write great. The fine is actually remarkably smooth and remarkably fine for what it is, and the nib is nice and springy, flows really well. I just love the way this pen writes. I like the way it looks too. It's not like my absolute favorite design of all time, but I've come to really love it. I like the fact that it's a demonstrator and you can see the ink inside. Very cool. It's got a big Con 70 converter. I really enjoy it. And then the other pen that I think you could easily know that I'm going to recommend is the Lamy 2000. It's a great pen. Definitely, like, when it comes to someone asking me, hey, what's a great entry-level gold nib pen? Easy. Lamy 2000, Pilot Vanishing Point, Pilot Custom 74. Those are always going to be my well, okay, I shouldn't say always going to be my go-to, but those are typically my go-tos because I love them, I use them. Great fan following of them. The only thing to watch out for with the Lamy 2000 is the nib on this has kind of a fine sweet spot. So it's kind of a shame because a lot of people will say, oh, I know they have quality issues, you know, can you please check my pen? And this is actually a separate video idea that I'm thinking about right now because Drew is my customer care manager. He's been here for 4.5 years. He has literally, I'm not joking, checked probably about 500 Lamy 2000s at this point and has maybe had a problem once with it. It's just a fine sweet spot, and that's all it is. It takes some getting used to. If you over-rotate the pen in your hand too much, then you might have some issues. But other than that, the pens are fantastic. That's why you read reviews of people that are like, this is the best pen I've ever used, and other people are like, this pen sucks and it's the worst thing ever, I feel so let down. It takes some getting used to. There's a lot of people out there too that get the pen and say, oh, I hate this thing, and they pick it up a little bit later and they're like, well, after I write with it for a little bit, I get kind of used to it and now it's my favorite pen. So it's very much of a polarizing thing. So I need to shoot some kind of video to just explain a little bit about how the nib is ground, and you know, show you like how it will write funky if you have it over rotated and stuff, because honestly that is the quality issue that you're hearing about with these Lamy 2000s. So if you can get past the sweet spot thing, fantastic pen. Piston fill. I love the understated elegance of the pen too, and the cap is just so satisfying to click and unclick, and when it's posted, it just like feels and balance and nice ink window, you know, all that stuff. So many good things going on. So a lot of great pens right in that price range for those entry-level gold nib pens. Fantastic deals going on there. And then your second question, oh, sorry, one other one that I will throw in there too is a Pilot E95s. It's a very different pen than all these other ones. It's a small little one. And the extra fine on that is really fine. The nib is pretty soft. You can actually get some line variation out of it. It's 136, so it's a little cheaper too than some of these other ones. You know, but also a very cool pen. And the way that it posts too, like the cap is so like smooth and long and satisfying when you cap it. Very, very cool pen. Very retro kind of look too. So very different pen. It's not for everybody, but it is really interesting, and I think it's worth a look. And then lastly, your question about the Pilot VP Stub. We've been out of these for a very long time. We got like a handful of them in this week, and they sold out immediately, and I know that it's been disappointing for everybody how few of them we've had. We're doing our best to get them, but I think it's just, they're just in high demand, and they can only make so many of them. So it's going to feel a little different than the Lamy italics, because the Lamy italics are all steel nibs. So they're going to be very stiff. They're not going to be, well, that's really kind of the big difference. But also the Lamy nibs, they need to be held down a little bit, like a little lower pen angle. I find the stub, the VP stub, works better at a little higher angle. So that's kind of the way that I'm finding a lot of Pilot nibs is they're intended to be held at a little higher angle. If you hold them at a lower angle, you could have some skipping issues here and there. It's also going to write a lot wetter. So, you know, me personally, I tend to hold my pens low, and I use a little bit more hand pressure when I write. They're meant to be held a little higher up. So if you can get used to that, it actually is a pretty respectable stub nib, especially for the price. I mean, you can only get it on a couple of pens, and then you can get the nib unit and then put it on whatever vanishing point you want. The nib unit itself, $61 for a gold nib, you know, that you're putting on the pen. So it's not too bad if you already have the pen body and you just want to get the nib and put it on there. So that's pretty cool.